Hello there, thanks for stopping by Max's Cards and Dice Dugout. This is episode 165, and this time out, we are at North Carolina Motor Speedway in Charlotte, North Carolina for race number 26 of the 1991 stock car project. We're using fast action racing from Downey Games. And this race was known as the Mello Yello 500. Charlotte Motor Speedway, or correct myself once again, North Carolina Motor Speedway as it was called then, is a 1.5 mile oval. No change in contact or mechanical, so it's an average track for both of those situations. And this race took place on October 6, 1991. That day, Mark Martin was the pole sitter, and Jeff Bodine was the winner. Okay, so things have really tightened up at the top. And before we set the field, let's take a look at the standings. As you can see, Davey Allison is still in first place. Dale Earnhardt, 9 points behind in second. Rusty Wall is 17 down in third. And the rest of the top 10, Ernie Irvin, Ricky Rudd. Rookie Bobby Hamilton now in sixth place. He's dropped a bit. Number 7 is Chad Little. Alan Kowicki is 8th. Sterling Marlin is 9th, and Harry Gann is 10th. And if you look all the way back to 14th position, Michael Waltrip, he's only 77 points off the leader. So things really have tightened up. And at this point, it's all about position. Wins are great, but positioning is more important. All right, as you know, we have to do bookkeeping in this game. I'll be doing that off screen. So let's set the field before we get started. And I always mention this grid is not a representation of track position, but rather a abstracted view of different events that happen during the course of a race and the drivers that are involved in those events. So we shuffle these up a bit, and I'll give them a cut. And we'll set the field. Dale Jarrett, Rick Wilson, Chad Little, Hut Strickland, Terry Labonte, Lake Speed, Joe Rootman, Davey Allison, Jimmy Spencer, Rick Mast, Darrell Waltrip, Sterling Marlin, Dave Marcus, Rusty Wallace, Rep Bodine, Richard Petty, Michael Waltrip, Bobby Hillen Jr., rookie Bobby Hamilton, Larry Pearson, Derek Cope, Mickey Gibbs, Ted Musgrave, Dale Earnhardt, Mark Martin, Kyle Petty, Ernie Irvin, Morgan Shepherd, Ricky Rudd, Harry Gant, Alan Kowicki, Bill Elliott, Jeff Bodine, Ken Schrader, Stanley Smith, and Jimmy Means. All right, first thing we will determine is the pole sitter. I'm going to read the white die first. We got a 56. And it's going to be Kyle Petty. He's had several poles this season. In fact, this will be his 6th pole. So we'll give him this marker there. And the first thing we're going to do, after I mark that on the score sheet, is Kyle Petty's going to face a challenge. And that challenge will be coming from 22, Hut Strickland. Okay, so we look at the green race rating. And the pole sitter gets a one-time +1 on that, so that's going to make Kyle Petty at 12. Hutch Strickland's an 11. The challenge is coming at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. He rolls a 7, fails. And Kyle Petty remains the race leader here in the early stages of racing. Okay, so the first phase is going to be a mechanical check. And we will randomly select a driver. That's 14. That's going to be Larry Pearson. Pearson's 12 o'clock is Chad Little. His 3 o'clock is Terry Labonte. His 6 o'clock is Ted Musgrave. You have to excuse my neighbor's car firing. I don't know, it might be appropriate for the race. And the 9 o'clock whips around over to Michael Waltrip. Okay, we're looking at the red mechanical rating. There's no change here at Charlotte. So, Larry Pearson is a 6. He needs a 5 or less. He rolls a 12, and he is forced to retire right off the bat. That's a fail. DNF. Okay, Chad Little, he's an 8. He needs a 7 or less. He rolls that 7, he's safe. Pass. Terry Labonte, he's a 5. He needs a 4 or less. He rolls a 6. He is also forced to retire. That's a fail, did not finish. Next up, Ted Musgrave. He's an 8. He needs a 7 or less. He rolls a 10, and Musgrave is also out of this race. We're losing drivers early. Fail. DNF. And last will be Michael Waltrip. He's a 7. He needs a 6 or less. He rolls a 3, and he passes. So Kyle Petty, who was not involved in any of that, remains the race leader. And he's going to face another challenge as we head into phase 2. And that challenge is coming from 42, Rick Mast. Okay, Petty's an 11. Rick Mast is a 9. He's challenging at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. He rolls 4, fails. And Kyle Petty remains the race leader as we head into phase 2, which is a phase of green flag racing. So we do a random driver, 4 adjacent. They go up against the leader, looking at the green race rating and using the quality pass matrix. So the random driver is 63, Stanley Smith. His 12 o'clock is Michael Waltrip. His 3 o'clock whips around to Rick Wilson. 6 o'clock is the king, Richard Petty. And his 9 o'clock is Rusty Wallace. Okay, so we look at the green race rating and the quality pass matrix. Well, first up is Stanley Smith. He is a 2. With Kyle Petty being an 11, that's a -9. It's an automatic failure. Stanley Smith gets lapped. He was not trying to take the lead. He was trying to stay on the lead lap. So fail and a green lap marker. Next is Michael Waltrip. He's an 11. Kyle Petty's an 11. His challenge is out of 0. Waltrip needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 10. We have a new race leader in Michael Waltrip. Pass. And he's the new leader. All right, next is Rick Wilson. Rick Wilson's an 8. Michael Waltrip's an 11. Challenge is at a -3. He needs a 10 to 12. Fails. With a 3. Michael Waltrip remains the race leader. Next is Richard Petty. He's an 8. Michael Waltrip's an 11. Another -3. He needs a 10 to 12. He rolls an 11, and Richard Petty takes the lead. Pass. And Richard Petty is the race leader. And he will go up against Rusty Wallace. Rusty Wallace is an 11. Richard Petty's an 8. That challenge is coming at a +3. He needs a 4 to 12 to take the lead. And Rusty Wallace, during this green flag racing, after all is said and done, is the race leader. So pass. And Wallace. Okay, next is green flag pit stops. So we are going to select a random driver for adjacent. They're going to go up against the leader looking at the quality pass matrix. Only this time we're going to be looking at the blue pit crew rating. So that random challenge is coming from 23. 23 is gone. I'm going to roll again. 16 is Derek Cope. So it's Cope. It's 12 o'clock is Dale Jarrett. His 3 o'clock is Lake Speed. His 6 o'clock is Chad Little. And his 9 o'clock wraps around to Bobby Hillen Jr. Okay, remember we're looking at the blue pit crew rating. So first up is Derek Cope. He's a 6. Rusty Wallace is an 8. Challenge is at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. He rolls an 8 and fails. Rusty Wallace remains the race leader. Dale Jarrett. He's a 7. Rusty Wallace is an 8. Challenge is at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. Rolls a 4 and fails. And it's still Rusty Wallace. Next is Lake Speed. He's a 6. That's a -2 to Rusty Wallace. Wallace's 8th. He needs a 9 to 12. He rolls an 8 and fails. Rusty Wallace is holding them off so far. Chad Little. He's a 7. His challenge is at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. He rolls a 7 and fails. And the last challenge comes from Bobby Hillen Jr. with a 7. That's also a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. He rolls that 8. And after all the pit stops, green flag pit stops, Bobby Hillen Jr. is now the race leader. Okay, the next part of phase 3, excuse me, is a penalty check. So we are going to select a random driver and 4 adjacent, and we're going to look at the pit crew rating. So the random driver is 24. That's an empty spot. I'm going to roll again. 52 is Alan Kowicki. So it's Kowicki. It's 12 o'clock is Rusty Wallace. It's 3 o'clock is Richard Petty. Six o'clock is Dave Marcus. And his 9 o'clock is Rick Mast. So we're looking at the pit crew rating. So this is to determine if there was any infractions on pit road during those green flag pit stops. And what you need to do is be lower or equal to your pit crew rating. You're good. If you're higher than your pit crew rating, like in the case of Rick Mast, if it was a 9 or greater, he would have had to come in for a stop and go. He would go down a lap, and he'd get a green lap marker due to the stop and go. All right, so first one is Alan Kowicki. He is an 8, or his pit crew is an 8. He needs an 8 or less. Rolls a 7 and passes. So pass. Rusty Wallace is an 8. He needs a 8 or less. He rolls a 3. He's good. Richard Petty is also an 8, or his pit crew is. He rolls an 11, unfortunately. Comes in for a stop and go, and he's down a lap. So fail. Green lap marker. Next is Dave Marcus. He's a 7, so he needs a 7 or less. Rolls a 5. He's good. And the last check is Rick Mast. He's an 8. Needs an 8 or less. Rolls a 9. And he also has an infraction. Maybe his crew and Richard Petty's crew got into it. Who knows? But he's a lap down as well, so that's a failure. Green lap marker for Mast, and Bobby Hillin Jr. remains the race leader. And as we leave phase 3 and head into phase 4, there's going to be 2 consecutive challenges. And the first challenge is coming from 51 Dave Marcus. All right, so Marcus is a 6. Hillin is a 10. This challenge is at a -4. That means Marcus needs an 11 or 12. He rolls snake eyes and fails. Bobby Hillin Jr. remains the race leader, faces another challenge as we head into phase 4, and that's coming from 13, Rick Wilson. Wilson's an 8, Hillin's a 10. Challenge is at a -2. 9 to 12. 7, failure. And Bobby Hillin Jr. remains the race leader. Okay, phase 4. Going to check for contact. Random driver and 4 adjacent. And we're going to be looking at the yellow contact avoidance rating. And here at Charlotte, there was no change to that. So the random driver, and this could include the leader, Bobby Hillin Jr. Here we go. It's going to be a 12. It's going to be Bobby Hamilton. Rick Wilson is his 12 o'clock. Hutch Strickland is his 3. Dale Jarrett, 6 o'clock. And his 9 o'clock whips around to Richard Petty. I believe the rules say yes, he can be involved in this. Okay, so it's Petty. Richard Petty. All right, so remember, we're looking at the yellow contact avoidance rating. You need to be lower than that to be safe. If you equal it, you are going to go several laps down. You've had to come in, and you're going to get a yellow lap marker. If you're greater than it, your damage is so bad that you're forced to retire. All right, so Bobby Hamilton is a 10. He needs a 9 or less. Rolls a 6 and passes. Rick Wilson is a 7. He needs a 6 or less. He rolls an 8, and he is forced to retire. So Wilson gets banged up, fail, did not finish. Hutch Strickland is a 7. He needs a 6 or less. He rolls that 6 and passes. Dale Jarrett is a 5. He needs a 4 or less. Another tough week for Dale Jarrett. He's forced to retire. Fail. DNF. And lastly is Richard Petty. He's a 5. He needs a 4 or less. He doesn't have to worry about being a lap down anymore because he is out. Lost a lot of drivers in this one. Fail. DNF. Bobby Hillin Jr. remains the race leader. Okay, now we have a series of pit stops under caution due to the contact. And it tells us here it's the race leader, adjacent cars, and 1 random. So it's going to be Bobby Hillin Jr. It's 12 o'clock is Ken Schrader. His 3 o'clock is Derek Cope as it wraps around. His 6 o'clock is Jimmy Means. And his 9 o'clock is Jeff Bodine. And we need a random driver. And that random driver is 24. Roll again. 63, Stanley Smith. He's lapped, so he can't be part of this. 36, Ernie Irvan. All right, so Bobby Hillin first is going to be Ken Schrader. And we're looking at the pit crew rating. So Schrader's an 8. Hillin Jr.'s a 7. This is at a +1. He needs a 6 to 12. He rolls a 10. Ken Schrader with his 4 wins passes and is the new race leader. All right, next is Derek Cope. Cope is a 6. Schrader's an 8. Challenge is at a -2. Needs a 9 to 12. He rolls snake eyes and fails miserably. Fail. Next is Jimmy Means. And Means is a 6. Schrader's an 8. -2 again. Needs a 9 to 12. He rolls a 3. Fails miserably. And then next is Jeff Bodine, who's an 8. Schrader's an 8. This challenge is at a 0. 7 to 12, and Bodine takes the lead. And Bodine takes the lead on a 10. Let's pass. But we still have the random check with Ernie Irvan. They're both 8s. Irvan is challenging at a 0. He needs a 7 to 12. He rolls an 8. And after those pit stops under caution, Ernie Irvan is your race leader. Okay, and he's going to face a challenge as we head into the closing laps action. And that challenge is coming from 62, nobody there. 45, Harry Gant. They're both 11s. So Gant's challenging at a 0. He needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 9, and Harry Gant becomes the race leader. Pass. And it's Gant. Okay, now we head into the closing laps action. First thing is we're going to see if there's a late race mechanical check. And this is only on the leader. So here at Charlotte on a 7 to 12, under the last highlight event table, there will be a mechanical check on Harry Gant. And that's a 10, so that's a yes. It's Gant. Okay, no modifications to mechanical checks. Gant's mechanical number is an 11, so he needs a 10 or less. He rolls a 7 and passes. Pass. And he remains the race leader, and now we'll face the challenge. And the challenge is coming from 33, Davey Allison. Points leader, Davey Allison. Okay. They're both 11s. Challenge is at a 0. Allison needs a 7 to 12. He rolls that 12 and takes the lead. All right, now we're going to see if there's any contact, late race contact. It'll happen on a 7 to 12. Roll a 10, and that's a yes. So it's the race leader, which is Davey Allison, his adjacent cars, and one random driver who are going to have to check their yellow contact number. So Allison is a 10. He needs a 9 or less. He's good on a 6. Pass. Next is his 12 o'clock, Kyle Petty. Petty is a 6. He needs a 5 or less. He rolls a 7. And Kyle Petty, who was kind of getting back into the mix, in the thick of things, this is going to hurt him. Fails and does not finish. All right, Ricky Rudd is the 3 o'clock to Davey Allison. Rudd's a 10. He needs a 9 or less. Rolls a 6. Successful. Mark Martin is the 6 o'clock. Martin's an 11. He needs a 10 or less. Ooh, rolls a 9 and just makes it. And the 9 o'clock whips around all the way to Rusty Wallace because Stanley Smith is lapped. And it's going to be Rusty Wallace. Wallace is a 6. He needs a 5 or less. Rolls a 7, and Rusty Wallace knocked out. Rusty Wallace, 3rd place in the point standings, is out of this one early. Fail. And DNF. And the random driver, 61, is Ken Schrader. Schrader's an 8, needs a 7 or less. Rolls that 7 and survives. Pass. Davey Allison remains the race leader. Okay, since we had contact, we're going to have some pit stops under caution. And it's the leader, 4 adjacent, and 1 random. Cannot include anyone lapped. So it's Davey Allison. His 12 o'clock is Jimmy Spencer. His 3 o'clock is Ricky Rudd. Excuse me, his 6 o'clock is Mark Martin. It's 9 o'clock. How do we handle this? Can't be Stanley Smith. Ricky Rudd's already involved in it. I think I'm gonna pick 2 random drivers. But let's get to his. Let's see. So the first random driver, and I'm not sure if this is the way to do it, but command decision here in the midst of things is 13. That's an empty spot. 65 is Jimmy Means. And the final random, 33 is Davey Allison. 42 is Rick Mast. He's lapped. 62 is no longer there, but 64 is Michael Waltrip. Okay, we're looking at the yellow contact avoidance. You want to be lower than that. And or excuse me, these are pit stops. We're looking at the blue pit stop or pit crew rating. And all of these drivers are going to be going up against the leader. Jimmy Spencer's a 7. Davey Allison is an 8. It's a challenge at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. Rolls a 7 and fails. Next is Ricky Rudd. He's a 9. Allison's an 8. Challenging at a +1. He needs a 6 to 12. And we have a new leader in Ricky Rudd. Pass. Mark Martin is an 8. Rudd's a 9. Challenge at a -1. Needs an 8 to 12. Rolls a 9. Mark Martin takes the lead during these pit stops. Pass. Jimmy Means is a 6. Mark Martin is an 8. Challenge at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. He rolls that 12, and Jimmy Means, for now, has the lead. Pass. And Michael Waltrip is the last challenge. He's an 8. Means is a 6. Challenging at a +2. He needs a 5 to 12. Rolls an 8, and Michael Waltrip, after the pit stops under caution, is the race leader. And he will now face a challenge. And that challenge is coming from 44, his brother, Daryl. All right. They're both 11s. This challenge is at a 0. Darrell Waltrip needs a 7 to 12. Rolls the 6 and fails. Michael holds him off and remains the race leader. Now, the next part is pit crew, but it tells us here, what I should say is another pit stop. But if pit stops under caution have taken place, that phase is voided. And lastly, we'll check for some late race green flag racing here. And here at Charlotte, that will happen on an 8 to 12. And that's a no. So we are down to the final challenge. And the way we determine the final challenge is we take the race leader, his adjacent drivers, and whichever driver has the highest race rating using the rules of priority as a tiebreaker, that'll determine who the final challenge is coming from. Okay, so Jimmy Means is at 12, but he's at 2. We wrap over here to Darrell Waltrip at 3. He's an 11, so right now it's him. 6 o'clock goes down to Ken Schrader, he's an 11. 9 o'clock, Bill Elliott, he's an 11. Darrell Waltrip at 3 o'clock wins the tiebreaker, so the two brothers are going to get tangled up one more time. So we're coming down to the wire. It's Michael Waltrip and Darrell Waltrip. They are both 11s. On a 7 to 12, Darrell Waltrip wins this race. Anything else, Michael holds him off and gets the checkered flag. And Darrell Waltrip passes Michael Waltrip, gets the checkered flag late here in the race. Well, of course it's late in the race. It's at the end. And he is your winner of the Mello Yello 500 that took place on October 6, 1991. All right. So, what I always call the fun part. Okay, first thing, leave that marker there. Of course, Darrell Waltrip comes off first because he's the winner. The driver that lost the challenge comes off second. And that's Michael Waltrip. And then we're going to temporarily put this here. And we go around using the rules of priority. So Jimmy Means at 12, Ken Schrader at 6, and Bill Elliott not at 9. So it'll be Ken Schrader finishing 3rd, Bill Elliott finishing 4th, and Jimmy Means with the top 5 finishing 5th. All right, so we can get rid of that. And now we go clockwise from the winner's position. We're in this top groove, which is only 4 drivers. So it's going to be Ricky Rudd, Davey Allison, who needed a good finish to stay in first place. Okay? So now we go straight out. And I always go to the right when I do this. So we go straight out into the next column and clockwise remove the drivers based on race rating. It'll be Alan Kowicki, Mark Martin, Hut Strickland, Dale Earnhardt, Brett Bodine, Harry Gant. All right, that's the 11s. Now we go for 10s. No 10s. 9s would be Brett Bodine. And 8 would be Jimmy Spencer with a good finish. All right. So that's everyone in the middle groove except for the lap driver. We go out to the, I guess that's the bottom groove. And we're going to go clockwise. The next will be Morgan Shepherd, Ernie Irvin, Sterling Marlin, Jeff Bodine. That's it for the 11s. Now 10s, Bobby Hamilton, Bobby Hillen Jr. Now it'll be 9s, Joe Rootman. That's it for the 9s. 8s, Mickey Gibbs, Chad Little. 7s, Derek Cope, 6s, Dave Marcus, and Lake Speed. Okay, so then we should go back in. There's no lap drivers there. Go out here. The next lap driver would be Rick Mast. And then finally back out to the bottom groove and Stanley Smith. And then we take the drivers who did not finish, put them on the bottom of the stack. And your top 5 for the Mello Yello 500 at North Carolina Motor Speedway in Charlotte, North Carolina on October 6, 1991. Darrell Waltrip, Michael Waltrip, Ken Schrader, Bill Elliott, and Jimmy Means. Rounding out the top 10, Ricky Rudd, Davey Allison, Alan Kowicki, Mark Martin, and Hut Strickland. So there you have it. I will total things up. Good news for Davey Allison is that Bobby Hamilton's not in the top 10. Neither is Dale Earnhardt, but he is in 11th position. So Allison has certainly picked up a little bit of room. But we'll see how that all works out because Ricky Rudd's ahead of him. Oh, there's all kinds of things that can happen here. And not being a mathematician, I have to sit down and figure it out. So that's going to do it for this episode. If you hung out with me, I appreciate it. And I'll be back again in the near future with another video. And until then, take care.